afternoon, everyone. I'm Liz Fernandez with Professional People Training, and we have two speakers for today's webinar. Dr. Nicki Humphrey is a veterinarian on the Swine Health Commodities staff. Nicki currently serves as the field liaison, where she is responsible for African swine fever response preparedness and national swine disease surveillance. Jacob Pell is a biological information scientist, data scientist within the Center for Informatics, Traceability, and Movements team, and the lead African swine fever, classical swine fever mycoform developer. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the webinar over to Nicki.
Thanks, Liz. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. I know everyone's all across the country. We appreciate you joining us this morning for our rollout of our new form called MICO for our ASF CSF active surveillance program. Our goal is that this form can take the place of the CLSM platform that you've currently been using. And this morning, our objectives are to give you an overview of what current CLSM users need to know about the form and getting access, what new users need to know, and what requests you need to make. And then we're going to go ahead and do a live demonstration of how to complete the form. And at the end, I'll give you a quick update on new surveillance targets for each state in case those of you in the field haven't had a chance to see those yet. They are in the new field guidance document that was sent out for African swine fever and classical swine fever. And then if you have specific questions during the form demonstration, go ahead and put those in the chat, and Liz will interrupt us, and we'll go ahead and answer those at that time. Otherwise, we're going to save most of our questions for the end for a question and discussion period. So feel free to type in any questions you have. This is a good time for you to learn anything you need to about the ASF CSF active program or about this form, or to express any concerns that you might have for us as well. We have about an hour and a half designated for today. However, I anticipate that we won't take up more than an hour, if even that. It should be a relatively quick run through of the form. That being said, this is being recorded for those who were not able to join today. So if you have staff that couldn't come, they'll still have the opportunity to revisit the training, and then it'll also be available for you guys to go back to if you need to as well. When we finish up the training today, I plan to send out a link to where we hold this recording, and I'll also include in there a brief guidance or SOP document that we've created for how to fill out the new microform. So with that, we're going to go ahead and get started. So if you're a current CLSM user, meaning you've already submitted your 513 and you already have access to CLSM and have been doing entries, Jacob and I have worked to create a spreadsheet, and we've already automatically signed you up for a MICO account. The one thing that I will say is that in a year, your supervisor will likely receive a request from the UMS just to verify that your roles still need to be what they are. And then it would be good if you can go into your UMS account and verify the states that you have access to, because the way the form works, when you go to select your collection state, the only options available to you are the ones that you put in your request for the 513 CLSM access. So please make sure we have the right states. If you collect in multiple states, then make sure you have access to all of those states. And then I'm going to turn it over to Jacob Pell so he can talk about what new access looks like and how to go ahead and obtain that access.
Oh, thanks, Nicki. This is Jacob. So for folks who do not currently have access to CLSM, you will have to submit two different requests. And, just to note, this is not, a permanent solution. It's a temporary transition solution. So the method for requesting a new account will be to submit that 513 to Dr. Humphrey, like you would have for CLSM. And then an additional step to get access to the actual MICO application, you will have to submit a user request in UMS as well. And so you would go in there, select general surveillance, and then the states to which, in which you're working, And then I would like to know, could you go back a slide? I think there's one other thing I'd like to mention there. Yeah, and so for state level folks or for state government folks, please ensure you have EOF level 2 access before submitting the request. It is required for MICO access. Yeah. And these will walk you through the steps. We also have a user guide that we can distribute. It'll outline, everything that you need to do within UMS, and it's hopefully verbose enough that it's easy to follow.
All right, so I'm just going to transition over to the application so we can walk you through how to enter a submission form. And you'll see this is what the screen pops up once you have logged in. I was going to try to show you, I tried to get mine all set up because sometimes my internet is a bit slow and I don't want it to take us a long time. So when you first log in, it might look like this, and mine might automatically log me in because I'm already here. But, yeah, it's going to. It'll take you to a page similar to when you get into any APHIS system where you'll have an option for using your PIV card, and you'll also have an option for using your EOF login. So for state folks, you'll have to use the EOF side, whether you're on a computer or a phone or a tablet. For federal folks, you should be able to log in with your PIV card if you're on a computer or a tablet that has a PIV card slot. From your phone, you will have to use the EOF login at this point in time. We just don't have a way around that. But just to give you a heads up on that. So before I work on a mock entry, I'm going to let Jacob just go through this entry page and talk about all the different features of the app.
Yeah, thanks, Nicki. So just to highlight a couple of the key points here on this landing page, when you get access when you first log in, you will not see, all of these forms. Currently, the ASF form is the only one in production, so you should only see, let me keep circling right now. If you look to the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see a number with a little down arrow next to the form. If you click on that quick. So this will show you all of the forms that are currently in your user queue. So any form that you have started and not completed, so the ones that you have saved and closed will be listed here. As you can see, there's a little cloud icon with a down arrow. That means it's currently not downloaded to your device, but once you click on the form, it will be in the download and you will be able to access the form at that time. Okay, and if you could go up to the top right, there's a little menu icon, looks like a hamburger stack. So if you look in here, you really won't need to worry about a whole lot in this menu, but this is where you will log out. If you look, you can see Outbox. If you're in the field and you do not have an internet connection, once you submit a form, it will land in your Outbox until you do have that internet connection. So if you would like to check just to make sure that your forms are going where they need to go, you can always check there. Okay. Yeah, that's all I'd like to highlight in that menu. And then down at the bottom, see a little sync button. The forms should automatically sync every time you log in. So you should see the current date and time, but if you don't and it looks like it's, quite a few days in the past, it never hurts to click it. So once you click that sync button, it'll attempt to pull in the most current version of the form and any sort of data references that we pull into the form as well. Those are all the key points on this page.
Thanks, Jacob. With that, I'm going to go ahead and start a submission, and I'm just going to go ahead and start from scratch so you can see the whole process and how the form should look on your end when you go to create a submission. Hopefully. All right. So the first thing that will pop up in the form is a new submission detail with the collection date and your state of collection. And this is why we said it was so important that you check your UMS roles, because you'll see in mine, I can only see what Jacob has set up for me to be able to see. So right now I've asked him to limit it to California and Indiana just for test purposes. So if you're in Indiana, you'll want to request Indiana. If you're in California, request California. And if you're in a state where maybe you guys sometimes cross borders and share roles, go ahead and request for both of those states. I'm just going to use California for today's purposes. If you were to go in and enter samples, say the next day after collection, you just want to make sure that you go into your calendar and change your date, but it will automatically populate with the current day's date. Then you can go down here for your premises information and search for premises. And when you're entering a new premise, you'll notice that the fields that are highlighted in yellow are fields that are required. So you're going to have data in each of those fields in order to move forward with the form. So because this is a test, I'll go ahead and enter it as if I was entering a new premise. But for those of you who have already entered premises in CLSM, those should have all transferred adequately to MICO. The only thing is I've noticed there are some folks who did not have pins in their premises from before, so you will have to add a pin just to give you a heads up before you can actually make your first submission on that premise. The other thing that I wanted to mention here is that this is the premises of collection. So I know there are a lot of variations out there, but if you're doing this at a slaughter plant or a market, even if you know the farm of origin of that pig, we would recommend that you put the premises where these samples were collected. There's one exception if you're, like, for example, Hawaii is entering, or it's, the pigs are coming to the lab and getting collected there. But we want you, for Hawaii, we want you to go ahead and put that farm of origin information here, and you'll see why in a bit here. I'm going to practice this or show you an example of an on-farm submission, but also show you some features if this was at a slaughter plant. So we're just going to say this is ABC Farm, and the pin is going to be 00P. I'm just making this up, but you need to use the actual pin when you do yours. And then the street address, make sure you put that in there. And the city. The lat and longitude is here. If you have that information, you can put that in. And we also have a feature if you're using your phone where you could just tap to set your GPS location. We do want you to try to collect phone numbers wherever possible for your premises. And email address is there. I know a lot of folks aren't able to get that, so that's no big deal. Operation type is really important here. So I said I was gonna demonstrate one for on-farm, but I wanted to show you really quickly that you can, when you have a market or concentration point or a slaughter plant, when you select slaughter plant, you'll have these options here to select whether it's a finisher, roaster, or salvor plant. Please make sure you check whatever box is appropriate for that type of plant. Then I'll show you the market and concentration. You'll have an option down here to show whether you know that these came from a garbage feeder or possibly had outdoor access. Mostly we're concerned that you get the market and concentration point in for those. If it's a production unit, you'll see that the different production unit types pop up. So I'm just going to say that this is a garbage feeder for the purposes of this demonstration. Because for the most part, I don't think our folks are collecting on high commercial operations at this point in time, but we have those options there for the future in case you do. And then I'll select garbage feeder and outdoor access. The most important box that you select when you have these garbage feeders or high-risk crems that you're collecting on farm for is that you select this one, because then it gets into the right category for reporting purposes. Then I'll go ahead and hit.
Hey, Nicki, we do have a couple questions coming in the chat that I think maybe we should address.
Sure.
So one of them is, what if the premise name you use does not exactly match the legal name of the premise of collection?
Maybe the person can give us a little bit better idea what you mean by the question, but I would say use the most appropriate premise name that you can that matches that PIN. So if you have that premise in EMERS already, try to use a name that most closely matches what goes with that PIN.
And I think maybe Jacob answered this. If the premise is in CLSM, you'll be able to pull it up in MICO regardless of its name. Any premises entered in MICO will be available for reference in future submissions. Okay. What did you click on to get this form?
Oh, so let me go back. We'll go back to the beginning here really quick. So basically that's a new premise entry, and I'm going to go back and start over so that folks can see. And then this time I will just go ahead and use a premise that's already in the system so you can see how to search and find your premises that are already in there. So here's what I clicked on. I just clicked on this.
I think she's referring to the original link to get into MICO.
Yeah. So we can send you all the link as soon as we roll out MICO. The plan is, as long as everything looks good this week, we will roll it out to the field on Monday. And when we do that, I will send out the link for the MICO app to everyone on the call. But this is basically where I went. So you can see up here, and it's this VS, and mine automatically logs me in. But it's VS app test 01. Yours won't say test. And then it has the APHIS-USDA.gov. So we'll be sure to send that link out to everyone as soon as the form is available to all of you next week. And then once I get into the app, I collect, like you'll probably only be able to see this ASF CSF case submission form, and that's how you enter into that form. I just have some others here because I was in the development portion. So does that answer the question, Liz?
I'm sorry, I was on mute. I think it does. Now, there is another question. Do you want the collections to wait until this is opened up next week? I have vets ready to collect starting tomorrow.
I'm going to leave that one open to Jacob.
Yeah, so right now, it is still possible for you all to go into CLSM and enter data there. We are not taking that away even, once we deploy MICO. So, that'll always be an option. But if you would like to wait until Monday to enter the information, you're welcome to.
Also, I just want to point out for folks, if you enter a submission in MICO, please do not enter that same data in CLSM and vice versa. If you decide you want to use CLSM moving forward, do not use MICO to enter that same data. There's some rules set up so you can't use the same referral number, but we just want to make sure that you understand you only have to enter it in one place. And this data that gets entered into MICO will feed into the CLSM system, and then you'll be able to go back and see your submissions from MICO in CLSM. Okay, so we're back in the form. I'm going to go ahead this time and just use the search function for the premises information. I just wanted to make sure that everyone understood how to enter a new premise and what those yellow highlighted fields mean. That's a field that is required to have data before it'll let you submit that form. So I'll just keep using California. When you search for your premise, you just hit search premises, and you'll notice down here it's searching, and a bunch of prems will pop up in this table. You can collect, all of theirs are related to mostly slaughter plants. I do think they have a couple of production units, which are garbage feeders. So there's a couple of differences that I wanted to show you, but maybe I'll just come back and show you that at the end. So I'll use the slaughter plant here, and I'll hit select premises, and then it will automatically populate all of these fields. Like I said, if you can get a phone number, great. It already has the operation type selected, and it's a finisher plant based on what was in CLSM. Any other questions on the premises before I move on to the next section?
So we do have a question. If one user in a state enters premises information, is that premises info available to all users in the state?
My understanding is yes, that for example, if Pennsylvania has 10 premises that have been entered in CLSM, whoever requests access for Pennsylvania will be able to see all of those premises that have already been entered and any new ones that get entered into the future. Is that correct, Jacob?
Yeah, I will say a little caveat with that, though. All of the new premises entered in MICA will be available to everyone in the state. However, if there is a premise in your state that only one person has access to in CLSM, it will maintain those permissions until that is changed. And so, if that's the case, please let us know. We can work to get that corrected.
Here's another one. Based on the picture that I just saw, does that mean you can save without having a premise ID?
No. It won't let you, it'll let you get past this screen, but when you get to the very last screen, which I can go to really quick, you'll get to here and you'll hit completed and it'll flag and say that you're missing a pen. So it won't let you actually complete the whole form. You'll have to go back and add that pen.
And if you look up in the upper left-hand corner of the screen and you see a red X, that's telling you the other side. Yeah. Those are all of the app roles. So, yeah, you can get to it through the menu as well as that red X right there at the top. Yeah, click on that. It'll show you.
If you see this red X, it'll tell you that, whatever is still X, whatever page still has an X on it, it'll indicate there's missing information. So right now we're missing a lot of information because we haven't even started the form. But I'll try to remember to show you this again when I get to the end after I've entered everything, and most of these errors should have disappeared from the form. If you ever run into a situation where maybe you don't have that information readily available and need to go back and find it or get it created, there is an option here to save your form, and it'll show back up in your list when you first log in where we showed you that drop-down arrow where I had a number 15 above mine. Just be sure that you hit this save before you exit out of the form and then hit close. Don't hit discard because you'll delete everything, and you don't want to hit finish because it's not going to let you finish anyways until you get that information in there. So that's an option if you need to go back and try to get more information on a submission. I'm going to head back over here. You'll see that for the Yosemite, I picked this one because I know that one has a pin. And then so it automatically fills all this in. If there are updates that you need to make to a specific premise, like a new owner purchases it and changes the name, but it will continue to have the same premise ID and address, you can go ahead and update that, and it will save to the system. The next thing that you're going to do is search for submitter, and I have not been saved in here, so I'd be a new submitter. So I'm going to hit that. But if your name is in here, you can just highlight it in this table down here and hit select submitter, and it will automatically populate all of this. One thing I will say is that the first time you enter in here, because CLSM wasn't saving your middle initial, you will need to enter your middle initial, and then it will save it to the system, so you won't have to keep going back and entering that. If your email address hasn't been entered for whatever reason before, you also have to enter that, and then it will save into the system. But since I'm a new submitter, I'll hit new submitter, and then you'll see again it highlights all of the fields that are required. If you don't have a middle initial, we do have this box here. However, I suspect most of us do have middle initials, so we'll make sure to enter that. And the reason that we're requesting the phone number and email address is because this information is helpful for us when we need to reach back for questions on submissions for data reporting purposes, but it's also important for the lab if they have any questions about the submission once they receive it. So this information gets transferred over to the packing slip. So now I've entered my information, and you'll see this button down here that says Generate Referral Number. It'll automatically generate your number based on the state where you're doing your sample collection, your initials, and then the date that you selected for sample collection date. If you're collecting from multiple locations on the same day, please make sure you put identifiers for each submission. So if this was my first collection for the day, I would put A. For the next premise, I would put B, C, etc. That helps us because, like I said, you can't generate the same referral number twice, and so we want to make sure that that rule gets applied across the board. It's the same for CLSM. I think most of you have been using that pretty well. So, Liz, I'll just check with you really quick. Any questions before I head on to the next page?
Yeah, so we do. We have one question that says, so can you say the different name under the same premise ID?
No, it's going to be, it'll only be one premises per PIN number that I understand. Is that correct, Jacob?
Yeah, so if you change any of the information that's associated with a PRIM already, like in the search system that you just saw, it will update that record. It will not create a new record. So keep that in mind.
Yeah, I might be wrong, but PIN should only be assigned to one specific premise at a time. So the only way that would change is if that premise changed ownership. It might be different in some states, and if so, can that person who asked that question reach out to me to talk about that specific instance maybe?
Sure. And then the other question that's in the chat is, how will MICO talk to EMRS, especially if information does not match between MICO and EMRS?
Yeah, I might let Jacob tackle that one, but MICO doesn't actually communicate with EMRS. So this is where when you do your data entry, you want to make sure that those two prems match up between what the PIN information was assigned to that specific business unit in EMRS and what you're putting into MICO. So they won't communicate with each other. MICO only communicates with our CLSM database, which we've already gone in and done some data cleaning of each of these prems, if that makes sense.
Okay, we don't have any other questions, so I think you can go forward.
All right, so the next section is where you'll enter your animal information and your associated specimens for each animal. We do have some rules set up in here that should help to make your form easier to use. So the first thing I'll do is enter an 840 number just so you can see the rules associated with RFID. I do realize not a lot of pigs tend to have ID, especially at like finisher market hog plants. So whatever form of ID that you're capturing, go ahead and enter that in this field. It was brought to my attention that maybe some animals might have multiple IDs. If that's the case, try to enter the most traceable ID first in the field. And if you need to include other IDs, you should be able to just put a space or like a backslash and include them. I'm not sure exactly how many characters you can put in here, but if you have that pop up for whatever reason, we don't yet have an ability to capture multiple IDs separately. They just don't feed into the CLSM form that way. So, so here I put an 840 number, and if you try to select something other than 840, this message will pop up and say that it looks like you entered an 840 ADP tag. Is that correct? And it will automatically change this animal ID type to an 840 tag. You can select your age class. So I know these are finisher animals. This pig actually came from Utah. So you can, here we want to make sure that this, if you know the state of origin of that pig, like where the lot or the shipment came from, go ahead and enter that state here. If it's unknown, just leave this blank, and if it's the state that you're actually located in, then go ahead and put that as well. Most of us are only collecting one specimen from each animal, so I'm just going to leave that as one. We did add this company owner information field here. I understand that at some locations they are getting information that helps them to trace animals, like, for example, Smithfield, Indiana might own these pigs, and they might get headquarters information for those pigs. And so you can put that information here. It doesn't necessarily mean that you know the farm of origin, but you know what state it came from and that headquarters information, so you can reach back to them if you ever have a non-negative. If you do know the state or the actual farm of origin for that pig and you have a PIN, you can go ahead and put that information here as well. This is more just for traceability purposes than anything. I think I saw a question pop up, so I might want to see. Do the animal IDs need to be captured? Currently, the vets are not collecting this as it is a market/holding point.
Whenever possible, yes, we would like to capture animal ID. I do know that a lot of plants, they only have tattoos or lot numbers, and so there's an option for that as well. And I was going to enter more than one animal just to give you a little bit of examples of how that looks. But yes, whenever possible, please try to capture that animal ID or something as an identifier. If you know the, like if all you have is the producer name that sent that pig there, you can put that there for the animal ID as well, so, or an animal name, and then you'll have an option here for other, non-official. You can use that. If it's a group or lot ID because they came as a group, you can use that as well. The clinical signs piece isn't, there's a link here going back to what premise you selected. So since I selected a slaughter plant, clinical signs that pop up here are ones that are associated with slaughter plant condemn codes or dead on arrival or just asymptomatic. If you were to select actual production unit, the clinical signs would look different. And so if we have time at the end, I'll try to run back through and show you one of those examples really quick. But this pig was dead on arrival. I know that a lot of plants won't let you collect those, but for the purpose of demonstration, I'm just going to use that. And then your specimen ID are your barcodes. One unique and cool feature about MICO is that if you're using your phone or a tablet, or if you have a scanner, a barcode scanner connected to your computer, which I don't have that because I'm at headquarters, but you're able to click over here and hit tap to scan the barcode, and it will automatically read that barcode for you and populate this field, and then it will tell you that it's a barcode ID. The specimen type, please make sure you select this. For the most part, for our active surveillance, we're collecting either spleens or tonsils. So if you're selecting whole blood here, we're probably going to reach back to you and say, hey, what's the deal with this tissue type or specimen type? We typically don't collect that for our active surveillance. We do, however, use those sample types for FAD, but we haven't started to use this one for a FAD. We're still using the 10-4s for those. So just so there's no confusion there. Your only preservation type is on ice. Now I've entered all my information. I'll hit Save Animal. And you'll notice that the animal, all of that information that I just entered populates in this table down here below. So it all comes down to the table, and you can double check your information if you feel like you need to. If say you notice, oh, I made a mistake in entering my barcode, you can go ahead and select this right here and hit Edit Animal, and it'll populate back up here in the top, and you can update your barcode, and then you can hit Save Edited Animal. If you needed to delete it because you accidentally entered the wrong animal on the wrong record, or you just got a little crazy and carried away and started saving multiple animals for no reason, you can hit this Delete Animal button as well. And you'll notice a new feature here. I know it was a bit challenging with CLSM to add multiple animals, but if I hit this Use Previous Animal Info for places like a slaughter plant, it quickly populates all of these fields again. So
origin state if I'm collecting all from the same lot, for example. So here I'll just put lot 2. I will change this to reflect appropriate animal ID type, but it doesn't make me enter nearly as much information. Just make sure if this pig was condemned for a different reason than dead, that you do change that. But it does populate everything for you. You can go ahead and scan your barcode again, and then select the tissue type that you collected, and then everything else is there, and hit Save Animal, and that one will then populate down here in the table as well. Any questions on entering animal information? I did not enter company owner information, but this is a free text field, so you're welcome to enter that company information and their phone number or their city and state, whatever you want to go ahead and put here. As I said, you know, if you do end up getting the farm of origin for that animal and they have a PIN or that farm of origin name and address, go ahead and put that information in there.
Nicki, there is one question in the chat. Where does antemortem condom fit under clinical signs?
Yeah, so we didn't put it under antemortem or postmortem specifically. We just have, if you have a pig that sticks out in the pins that's on antemortem inspection, you can put unthrifty appearance here. But for the most part, we're trying to target sick and dead pigs here, so pigs that get condemned for septicemia, erysipelas, pyemia, those kinds of things. We want you to be sure to try to target those. So I don't think that plants are most likely going to allow you to collect sick pigs on antemortem out in the pen. But if they do, you can put those under unthrifty appearance, or just go ahead and put them under the dead or dead in pen or dead on arrival, because they're going to be dead outside if you are collecting them antemortem. Does that answer the person's question?
I believe it does.
All right. Any other questions before I move on to the next page?
We have no other questions right now in the chat.
Sounds good. This will take you to your last page of your form. And for the demonstration purposes, it's taking us a bit longer because I wanted to make sure to address everyone's questions since this is a new form. But for those who have been testing the form for us, an entry now is taking them about 5 to 10 minutes, even when they have 10 animals. So I think you'll find that the form is a lot more user-friendly and quicker to get data entered. So we hope that you liked it. Anyway, so now I get to this page on the form, and I'm just going to verify that I've entered all of my data. We can double-check our app rules. The only thing that I haven't completed right now is to confirm my packing slip, which is the next step anyway, so that looks good. I've completed my data entry. I think everything looks good. I'm selecting the lab where I'm going to send this. You'll notice that our list is now much shorter. It's only the labs that are approved, minus there's one lab in here that's extra. But so now make sure that you're selecting the lab where your samples are designated to be sent. If you're in a state that doesn't have a target and you have some active surveillance samples you want to collect, just reach out to the swine staff, and we'll be sure to direct your samples to the right lab. Some of this is based on funding and whatnot, so if you haven't been designated a lab, you just need to make sure that that funding is available before we send them some additional active surveillance samples. So then you'll see that the lab email automatically populates. These all come from a spreadsheet. So what's going to happen when I go ahead and submit this form is I, as the submitter, will get an email of the packing slip, and then the laboratory designated email will also get a copy of the packing slip, but you'll also want to make sure that you review your packing slip and verify that this window automatically pops up. We haven't been able to prevent that from happening, but you'll want to verify on your packing slip that your referral number transferred over, that your collection, whoever collected the samples transferred over, or whoever is submitting the samples, that your collection site information transferred over. I know the labs really like to receive the PIN and this information with it, and then your collect date, the lab, and then your samples all transferred over, that your specimen IDs match and your animal IDs are there. And it'll automatically populate on the microform that you're requesting ASF and CSF. Please make sure that this looks like it's working correctly for you, because you will need to still print these forms out, these packing slips out, and send them with your samples to the lab. So a copy of the packing slip still needs to be included with those samples in the box. I'm not going to worry about saving this, but normally I would save this as a PDF to my computer, although now you are also going to get them in an email as well. So my packing slip looks good. I'm going to go back to my form and just leave that there. I'm going to hit that I confirmed that the packing slip was reviewed, and you'll see now that this red X up here has turned to green, which indicates that my form is complete all the way. Before I go ahead and hit the last step of the form, are there any questions so far? Because once I hit submit, this is all going to go away.
Yeah, so we do have a couple questions, Nicki. Is MyCo available as a standalone app to download for phones, tablets, et cetera, or just access through the website?
Jacob?
Yeah, so MyCo is a mobile application, and so you can find it in your app store for whatever device, Google Play or the Apple App Store. But having said that, there are a couple of things that you will have to do to configure the app once it is downloaded. And again, it is in the user guide that we will distribute for you all to reference.
Yeah, and the other question is for post. Go ahead, Nicki. I'm sorry.
Everyone will receive the download instructions for how to get this onto your computer as well as onto your phone or tablet at the same time that we send out the SOP for how to fill out the form as well. So we'll make sure to take care of how to get everything onto your systems for sure and how to get you logged in.
And then the other question is for post-mortem condemned. Other establishments are given a list of what qualifies. With that option listed in that manner, can we just take any condemns that they have for sampling if they call?
We would like you to try to target the condemns that specifically would, possibly indicate ASF or CSF, so septicemia, erysipelas, possibly, you could put things like pneumonia. We were seeing some folks submit arthritis, probably less likely to be ASF, CSF. But if you do end up collecting some that don't fit specifically with erysipelas or septicemia, you can put them under post-mortem condemned other. But again, try to target the ones that specifically could indicate ASF and CSF.
Okay, that's the only other question I had in the chat.
All right, perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and hit submit just so I can quickly run back and show you something else. When you hit submit, the form will, as long as you're connected to the internet, it'll go ahead and submit itself, and it'll remove itself from your queue, so you won't be able to get back to it in MyCo, but it shouldn't take long, and you should be able to go into CLSM if all of a sudden you remembered, oh, I forgot to enter something, or I think I messed up something. You'll be able to access it through CLSM and make any changes there. We are looking at functionally being able to get back into these forms in MyCo, but I think that's still under development and maybe comes down the line in the future. I'm sorry, my computer is a little slow, so it might take it just a bit to submit. But you won't you won't get a thing that will pop up that says your form submitted. It'll just take you back to the home screen here. Go ahead, Jacob.
Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to mention really quick about the MyCo to CLSM time period. So we look for submissions every 5 minutes. So if you're not seeing your submission pop up in CLSM within about 10 minutes, please reach out and let me know, and we can see what's going on there. But it shouldn't be any more than 5 minutes there. And to kind of touch on some of the other data that we're pulling into MyCo for y'all to use to pre-populate the form, there is some data latency there. So if you do submit a record with a new premise, for example, that new premise won't show up for 4 hours for you to pull back into the form. So if for some reason you need to go back and do another inspection at that facility, it will, take 4 hours for it to pop up again for you to reuse.
Real quickly,
I have a question. Did you see that? Was a decision made about sex? If not, is there a field where we could record it?
Yeah, Deshiva, there was no, we did make a decision that wasn't a field that was highly populated by users across the board. Most of the time we were getting sex unknown, so we didn't feel that that was a field that was a necessary requirement. However, you'll notice that that company info field pops up for every animal, and so you can always, if you have that sex, you can always put it in there if you need to. And then the other thing I was going to mention is if you go to a slaughter plant and you're pretty diligent about entering every owner's, like if you're collecting from 3 different owners from that slaughter plant for the day and you put those in 3 different entries, 3 different micro entries, so A, B, and C, based on the owner of those lots, you can just put that company owner information on your first pig and you don't have to re-enter it every time. However, it will copy over with that copy function as well. So. I thought I would really quickly go in and just show you what I meant by if you select the production unit, what clinical signs will show up when you get to that animal information. So I'll wait for this to get there, but if there are other questions, we can answer in the meantime. That's not going to work. So in this case, I'm just going to pretend that this was an on-farm sample. I believe that these are garbage feeders because the only ones that have really been entered into California. So if you are doing an on-farm garbage feeder, just make sure to select the high risk. I'm just going to leave the prem here, but mostly I just wanted to be able to show you that the clinical signs populate based on what type of operation you select. So if you select, for example, a slaughter plant, then the only options that will show up are that the dead and pin, dead on arrival, the asymptomatic, postmortem condemned, septicemia erysipelas, postmortem condemned other, and then the unthrifty appearance. However, if you select a production unit, so you're collecting on farm, and you get down here to your animal information, you'll see a different set of clinical signs populate that more closely align with what you might see on the farm. So I just wanted to point that out to folks that the operation type does then pull in the appropriate clinical signs for you.
So, Nicki, there is a question or a statement in here. It says, it is worth noting you cannot use the back button on the browser to go to previous screens. You must use the in-application navigation tools at the bottom.
Yes, please make sure that you remember to do that because it can kick you out of the app if you use these buttons up here. That's why we put them up here. The other thing is down here you'll see there's a previous section and a next section, so you can either navigate using those bars or you can navigate using these arrows. Any other questions? So I think we still have a little bit of time, and I know that maybe not everyone is aware that we did update state targets at the end of last year. So we were hoping for the start of this fiscal year, but recognized that it got sent out a bit late. So just wanted to point out to those of you who are in some of these states over here in this table that these are your targets for this fiscal year. These are targets, so don't get heartburn or lose sleep if you can't meet these targets this year. But these are goals that we would like to strive for in future years when we do get, when you do have noticed that the targets have increased. So we're finding that most states are, doing pretty good at meeting their targets or working effectively to try to hit those targets. And if you want to talk about your targets or strategies for how to increase your sampling if you need to, feel free to reach out to the swine staff as well. We're happy to have individual conversations with each state on their target numbers.
There is another question, Nicki. Where is that updated information posted on Target?
Yeah, it was sent out in the VS field guidance for ASF CSF collection. And this table, I just pulled it out of there. So if you did not get a copy of that, either ask your EPI or you can reach out to me directly and I'm happy to send it to you. Or I can try to also just include it with all of the other handouts that we're going to send on how to log in and that kind of stuff. I'm happy to do that as well. That might be easier. That manual goes through how to collect the samples and is pretty detailed, but I think you'll see towards the end this is an appendix to that manual, and that's where the tables are located.
Okay. Do we have any additional questions?
As a reminder, to submit a written question, select all panelists from the drop-down menu in the chat panel, enter your question in the message box provided and send.
I was just going to switch back over to the presentation really quick so folks can see. If you have any issues when you start using the microform, like if you have questions about the fields or the form for whatever reason maybe isn't functioning correctly for you, feel free to reach out to myself directly, or you can email these two contacts on here. One gets you to data services, which I believe is Jacob's group, which is the current format that we're going to use to try to troubleshoot any issues. And then the other gets you to all of the swine team emails, and so someone will respond. We've also invited the surveillance, the SDA training group to this call, so they should be able to help you with form questions as well if that's someone who you've reached out to in the past for CLSM questions. But we definitely want...
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I was just going to say we definitely want feedback if you're running into any issues. We need to know about them right away so we can try to correct them. So definitely reach out.
The one question is, the last question that's in the chat is, will I also need access to CLSM?
Currently, yes. You will have to have access to both databases in order to use the MICO app because the data pulls from CLSM into MICO. Okay. And then backwards.
Can you put the help email in the chat? Yes, I can. I can't because I don't have it.
Yeah. Hold on just a minute. Oops.
Yeah, if you can cut and paste it and put it in the chat, that would be great.
And Nicki, looks like the PowerPoint is closed. Can you please open it?
Yeah, I'm trying.
Yeah, she's just trying to cut and paste it to put it in the chat.
All right, did that go through?
That came through. And we do have a couple more questions. What is the actual app name? If I search MI-CO, it doesn't seem to come up.
I believe it's My Corporation, but there is a special search name that we had to use to get it to show up. Jacob, do you know? It's MI, it's like a small MI and then a corporation.
So I pasted the link into the chat. But, just so you're all aware, you will not have access to the form until Monday. So if you try to log in, you'll either get an error or you'll see a blank screen. So, maybe wait until Monday to try it out. Yeah, we'll distribute all of the access information after this webinar.
And the last question I have is, when is the deadline for collecting the target samples? And can you repeat what happens if a state is unable to obtain the number of target samples?
Yeah, so it's typically a fiscal year cycle, so October 1 to September 30th. But you could also do, you could either use your fiscal year or calendar year. We're trying to display the data by fiscal year now, so that just gives you an idea. And if a state doesn't meet its target, we just try to reach out and talk to them about the challenges that they're facing. But there are no penalties per se.
Nicki, this is Celia Antonioli, and also I would like to add, if you kind of spread them throughout the year, that is probably preferable than just clustering your quota in 1 month.
Thanks, Celia. Okay. If there are no questions, Liz, I just wanted to say thank you to everyone for joining and for being so supportive of the rollout of the ASF CSF active surveillance program. I think for all the challenges we faced with COVID over the last year and just the rollout in general, we're pretty pleased that states have been able and willing to continue to get samples and support the program. So we do appreciate everyone's involvement.
We do have one last question that we'll take from the chat. How will the collection be recorded when my state is collecting by USDA co-op agreement from 4/1/2021 to 3/31/2022?
I will say, so I see Jenny's the one who posted that. So Iowa has been pretty good. Like, we just report the data by fiscal year, but we recognize that there are different periods, like for the cooperative agreements, and some folks report on annuals. It does seem that states, no matter what period we look at, are still working pretty closely to meet their targets. So we're not getting, too caught up in what that time frame is. If I go back and look at Iowa, for example, from October through September of the previous year, they met their requirements. So even though those cooperative agreement periods are overlapping or not the exact same, your sample collections are still meeting the requirements. So it seems like things are still working pretty well. But if we run into issues, we'll reach out. That's the beauty of spreading them out over multiple months, is that even if you collected samples in last year's cooperative agreement, those can still count towards that fiscal year. And then you'll start your new cooperative agreement cycle, and the rest that are collected from April until September of this year will count towards the fiscal year. So we don't look at it, directly, that those only count towards that cooperative agreement cycle.
Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions, I think we'll go ahead and conclude this webinar. And I want to thank everybody for attending. And it will be recorded, or it has been recorded, and it will be posted on the National Training and Exercise Program video gallery. So, and with that, I will wish you all a good afternoon.